Hi there, welcome to iTWire TV. Today we're joined by Qualys Chief Technology Security Officer for Australia and New Zealand, Richard Sorosina. Thank you so much, Richard, for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you, David.
No, thank you. Well, I guess let's start with, can you give me some background on Qualys and, what's the focus and plans for our market? Yeah, tell me about the Qualys story.
Yeah, sure. Look, so Qualys has been around since 1999, believe it or not. And in that time, we've been providing security and compliance capabilities to our customers through our Qualys security platform. That security platform is really a consolidated set of capabilities that I would say forms let's say, at the core of any good cybersecurity program. So I'm talking about things like asset management, vulnerability management, risk-based vulnerability management, patching, and even having things like a compliance capability that can scan your environment for look for things like misconfigurations. Cyber breaches tend to occur through simple things like misconfiguration. So Qualys has this compliance capability where we can measure you against best practice and standards and ensure that you're safe and secure. And again, we've been doing that for 2 decades now. Really, our approach to risk-based security management and our consolidated approach is resonating very well in the market. It certainly is meeting the market in terms of the trend that we see around consolidation. It's a very common conversation that we have. The risk-based approach to security management is also a very common conversation. So, Qualys is right there. From the numbers I can talk about, I think we posted a 20% revenue growth last reporting year. And, in Australia and New Zealand, we're certainly expanding out our operation and bringing on new hires. So, I think we're resonating well in the market right now. And the focus, of course, is to continue to be the desire to be the best risk mitigation platform in the industry at the moment.
Yeah, wonderful. That's exciting. And I guess, Richard, I'm interested in your background as well. How did you get into security and how security changed in between now and when you started?
Wow, I'm going to be showing my age a little bit now, I suppose. I mean, I started in 2000 in my journey in cybersecurity, I suppose, and it wasn't really a thing then. I mean, there was security, I suppose, but it wasn't, certainly not today. I mean, if you told me that the cybersecurity crime market, for example, would be something like, I think it's $6 trillion this year, I'd have, globally, I've sort of had a hard time believing that. But sadly, we find ourselves in this situation. What's been interesting for me is, I suppose I've worked at technology vendors most of my career, so it's been fascinating to see how technology has had to develop with the evolving cybercrime landscape. And how sophisticated technology has become in those 20 years, and certainly how customers have had to evolve their strategies and their capabilities and organizations to meet those trends. I mean, back in 2000, if an organization was interested in security, and I say if because it wasn't on the agenda of boards and CISOs those days, right? It was really not something that people invested in. But if you did invest in it, you spent your money on prevention primarily, right? So how do we stop people getting in? And over time, obviously, we know that strategy has failed largely, and it's more about detection and response, understanding what risks and threats you have, understanding your core business risks, and aligning your protection to that, assuming you'll be breached and limiting the impact of a breach. And that's been a huge change. And that's one since 20 years, it's been one in a sea of changes. I mean, we could talk about the adoption of cloud, for example, ad nauseum, I suppose, in that time period, and a whole load of other things that have changed. But yeah, I've seen some big change in my 20 odd years in the business.
Wonderful. And I guess in that time, cyber criminals aren't abating, are they? I mean, crime's not going down, it's going up. I guess, what do you see?
No, I agree. I think by any metric, that's the case. And I hate to be pessimistic and doom and gloom, but we certainly do see that cybercrime continues to increase. The tactics continue to evolve. The methods that are used to attack organizations become more sophisticated. I like to reference things like the Australian Cybersecurity Centre report for this region. They reported a 14% increase year on year in cybercrime total last year. I think one of the dazzling stats in there was a 500% increase in ransomware attacks since the start of COVID-19. That's an astonishing number. 500,000 new malware samples submitted daily. I mean, it's an onslaught. Qualys, we do our own threat research too. From our perspective, we've seen 25,000 new vulnerabilities in the last reporting year from software and configurations. To me, it represents a challenge. But what I find a little bit frustrating is, as an industry, we don't make it easy for ourselves. And what I mean is, we're still getting hit by the basics. We're still getting hit by simple misconfiguration errors. If you look at that ACSC threat report, their top call out is the rapid exploitation of new vulnerabilities, or the failure to patch existing vulnerabilities as their top call out for why organizations get breached. And, with Qualys seeing 25,000 new vulnerabilities get a unique CV ID, it's critical. And we also know that organizations take about 30 days to run their patch cycle. But new vulnerabilities are weaponized in about 19 days average. So there's a gap there. And that only applies to the 50% of organizations we talk to that actually regularly do that patch maintenance and patch cycle. So that's a huge exposure. And the point of the existing vulnerabilities this year, different than other years, and we've seen more and more historical vulnerabilities start to get weaponized. So we're seeing more and more vulnerabilities older than 3 years start to become weaponized. Again, cyber criminals are relying on you, not patching your environments, not doing the basics, which is how most organizations get breached and why we keep seeing this increase in cybercrime.
Yeah, sad, isn't it? And
yeah,
you talk about vulnerabilities being exploited easily. What about the good side of IT, like new advances in technology? So, for example, ChatGPT. A lot of people are very excited about generative AI, but on the flip side, is that something that the bad guys can weaponize against us as well?
Yes, it is, and I don't have any real statistics or stats because we're at the sort of new dawn of this, but certainly from what I talk to business leaders about, and certainly within the industry, we are seeing a few examples of how it's being leveraged. So one of them is very well crafted phishing campaigns, for example. So ChatGPT is really good. Bard's really good at wording those phishing emails to be more emotive, to get you to click on them, of course. We are also seeing it used to do things like either develop or improve malware code, for example. Now, I should say as well that those organizations like OpenAI have put restrictions in place. So you can't just go and say, ChatGPT, please write me a piece of malware. But unfortunately, it seems very easy to rephrase the way you ask a question and it will happily, readily create you code. The other thing that I'm concerned about with that AI that I haven't seen yet, but I suspect will happen, is we'll probably see a lot more social engineering. So I think, one of the engineers was talking to me the other day to synthesize my voice perfectly through an AI app. And that sent shivers down my spine, and it was really good. And so I think, that kind of thing is going to be used, obviously, to social engineer people. Now, I will say that the good guys are using AI too. So good guys like Qualys, we are building that into and continue to build that into our capabilities, like our risk algorithms. And I am hearing some positive use cases around it, helping with cyber incidents, for example, with organizations, even detecting phishing emails, for example. So, it's going to be one of those double-edged swords, I guess, where we can both use it and combat each other. So, not a completely negative outlook, but yeah, it is definitely being used in that capacity, David.
Yeah, I guess another thing on my mind is, we talk, showing my age as well. Back in the day, we talk about, the network's our perimeter, we've got to secure the perimeter. But today, in today's world, companies are far flung, working from home, remote working, the whole internet is your perimeter. So I guess, how can we effectively secure IT assets today when they're so far flung and so diverse? And
absolutely, it's a major challenge. Look, the rise of remote working, even before COVID-19, presented a challenge, and then obviously with COVID and everyone, lots of businesses not even going back to the office or being hybrid now, with their in the office, out the office approach. It's made it a challenge. It's certainly introduced visibility difficulties, as you allude to, and that's certainly one of the main issues that we see. But it's also introduced a bigger attack surface. That now we see people working from coffee shops on unencrypted Wi-Fi connections using company data, or the introduction of shadow IT. We see people using unauthorized applications on their home computers, inputting corporate data into it, and you don't control those systems, and so it becomes a huge problem. But from a Qualys perspective, I think that's something we've understood really well. Our entire capability, for example, is built into a single agent that can be extended across your entire platform. And that would be, traditional infrastructure like your servers and your desktops, but then VDI, public cloud, your mobile devices and your laptops and desktops. So we can extend visibility down. And it's important to have a capability like that in your business, where you have a tool that can see that visibility, and then you can apply your patching and your vulnerability management outside of your traditional perimeter, and monitor. And we can even do things like look for unauthorized applications. So if your users are deploying non-authorized tools and tech, then obviously we can do something about that. So having that level of ability is really important.
Yeah, fantastic. And what about things like zero-day risks or simple misconfigurations? Are they things we can protect against as well?
Yeah, they are, but I would say zero-day risk might be, one of the largest challenges that you would face in security, because essentially you're trying to protect yourself against something you can't see. So if a previously undisclosed vulnerability is being used, yes, that presents a serious challenge. But there are absolutely things you can do. I will caveat that you can't be 100% safe against an unknown, because if you could be safe against all unknowns, we wouldn't have cybersecurity, I suppose. But or it's a product that I would certainly buy. But look, Qualys does put you in a good position, for example, to protect yourself against that sort of thing. So first and foremost, we provide you with an asset capability, and that means a software asset inventory. So if, for example, we have another log4j, you would know where all of those instances of that vulnerable software run and what versions it's running, which was one of the main problems of log4j, for example. So first and foremost, you know where that vulnerable software is. Second thing is we have a capability through our compliance management capability where we can scan for misconfigurations that I spoke about earlier, and just making sure that your environment is configured correctly and sufficiently hardened to a standard, again, protects you from zero-day vulnerabilities, because even if you're breached, it should hopefully reduce that blast radius. That vulnerability can't be exploited across your entire business. The third thing we can do, which is really interesting and is a good, strong mitigation, is we can do something called deploying a compensating control. And a compensating control, think of it as a workaround. So what we do is our threat research unit gets the information from vendors like Microsoft on Patch Tuesday. They will look at the zero-day vulnerabilities and they will build a workaround where there's no patch available. So it could be something like, we're going to write a piece of code that disables a registry key or stops the service from running, or modifies a piece of software, which is how we stopped log4j before a patch came out. And what it will do is it puts a mitigation in place so that vulnerability can't be exploited. It cannot be 100% guaranteed to work all the time, but it's a strong capability that a lot of our customers appreciate. So there are things like that. Now, outside of Qualys, I would say, look, my mantra is always assume you're going to be breached, look at your environment, figure out what the impact of that breach will be, figure out what your crown jewels are and how you're going to protect them, and try and limit the impact in case you do get hit with a 0-day or something like that, that you can at least be in a good position to stop it.
Yeah, fantastic. Actually, that log4j example, that's wonderful, because yes, I've seen companies where, exactly as you said, they knew that they were exposed, but just finding all the tools, because even if they weren't using log4j in their own apps, they were using apps that were using log4j, and they had to identify.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. So that was a nightmare for many organizations.
Yeah, so that asset tracking, that's wonderful. But I guess that you wonder, so Qualys sounds awesome, but I guess how many separate tools and teams, do you think we still need to use in the fight against cybercrime? Is there a way to get maybe a single view of security and compliance across the organization, with prevention and detection and response and everything in between? Can that be solved in a single pane?
David, this is the number one topic that I talk about today, I think, especially with leaders of business that manage and particularly ones that manage the purse strings, but they want to get the most out of the capabilities that they have. We know from stats that I think small to medium enterprises deal with about 8 to 10 security tools in their environment, which would be difficult to manage for a small team. Large enterprise, between 40 and 60, which is a phenomenal number. And that's 40 to 60 different consoles and different systems that you've got to tune and feed and water. And maybe you can automate between them to help your teams out and that sort of thing. And I think very quickly now the market has realized that this approach is not plausible. And what we're seeing more and more is organizations consolidating core capabilities into a number of security platforms. I'm not saying, by the way, that everyone consolidates into a single super platform, because that doesn't exist either. But it probably wouldn't happen anyway. But core capabilities with fewer platforms, so maybe 4 or 5 vendors, 3 or 4 vendors, rather than 40 different vendors trying to do that. And obviously, with a security platform that's consolidated, you can apply automation across it. It will be a single source of truth. In an incident, for example, your times to detect and respond would be much better, because the information is all there in one place. And again, that is the major trend that I see in the market right now. Is organizations have realized very quickly that this is unmanageable, and it needs to be. We need a consolidated approach of core tool set.
Yeah, That's it. And I suppose talking about the people with the fingers on the purse, a lot of companies pay cyber insurance, which obviously has a place, but, isn't it better, I suppose this is academically thinking, isn't it better to, avoid having to pay out and avoid having that reputational damage? I guess, does a platform like Qualys mean we could do away with cyber insurance, or do you still think they go together? Is there still a place for that?
It's a good question, and it's another common topic that I talk to a lot. The answer to that is we're not here to get rid of cyber insurance or replace cyber insurance for you. I would say the opposite, actually. We are a platform that could probably assist you in getting cyber insurance, or at least getting a reduction on your premium. I mean, there's obviously no guarantees there, but the information that we provide is, we provide you with an overview of your environment, your risks and threats, what the critical is, and that sort of thing. And that's what cyber insurers want from you. And want to know from you. And interestingly, the Cyber Insurance Council of Australia, the Insurance Council of Australia, talked to the market being hugely underinsured. And I think a lot of that is because it's difficult for organizations to actually produce that information. Certainly for the small to medium business market, I think only 20% of organizations in Australia have cyber insurance, which is quite small, and quite a surprise to me when I found that stat out. And it's more for larger organizations. And I suspect a lot of it is because I've looked at the requests that you get from insurers, and they can be anything from incredibly high level ideas about your architecture right down to deep technical minutiae of a specific thing within your environment. And that's difficult. Now, the other thing is that cyber insurers aren't just there to insure against loss. And when people ask me what the value of it is, keep in mind, they do provide services as well, some of them that are not readily available in the Australian market from other organizations. And what I mean are things like, if you get breached, they have ransomware negotiation services, for example. They have media services where they can go out and negotiate a breach to the market in case you don't have the skills to do it. They have boots on the ground IR responders that they can send to you that, again, would be typically very expensive to get from a IR organization. So, it's not just about insuring against loss. And there's certainly other things there that you can be utilized for, but really Qualys should really be aiming to aid you in getting that insurance, certainly not doing away with it. And I wouldn't recommend that you do away with it at all.
No, it's pretty cool. But that's awesome to know that, insurance, I guess we all need insurance, but it's good to know that that'll help you give confidence that you can assess your risk profile, that you can reduce your premium. You can actually get the insurance because your risk is quantifiable. So that's awesome. Well, I'm sold. So I guess, can you tell me, any great Australian Qualys success stories you have? Are there any customers you're allowed to talk about who are using Qualys?
Yeah, there's one I can talk about. There's a few, but one I'll talk about is a company called Ilion. If you don't know who they are, they used to be Dun & Bradstreet, which is a name that I think a lot of people will know. Yeah. So they're obviously a provider of data analytics services to a lot of organizations, particularly large FSI services, highly regulated services like telcos and government. And I think when we spoke to them, they had something like a record count, about 30 million records of sensitive data that they had spread across thousands and thousands of assets. So first and foremost, their main issue was visibility of those assets. They never had a full list of those assets. And if you have assets that are unmanaged and unseen, then clearly that's an exposure and a risk to your business. The second thing is, when you have an asset set that large, when you want to run vulnerability scans, the tool they were using would generate millions of vulnerabilities. And then it's a question of which ones do you look at first? And so again, prioritizing those vulnerabilities, and that's an accusation thrown at a lot of vulnerability scanning tools, is how do I prioritize when what's being sent back to me, because it's unmanageable. The third thing that they were looking at is then how do they actually go out and quickly patch those devices? Because when you've got thousands of assets and lots of vulnerabilities and you want to go out and patch them, that's a big effort. And a lot of it was manual. So we're talking about days and days to do that patch cycle. And the third one, a fourth one, funnily enough, was, again, consolidation. Everyone is consolidating. They had a huge tool set spread across, all different parts of their environment and remote workers and all the rest of it. How do you have a tool set that they can consolidate down, and where there's overlaps in that big, vast tool set that they have? How can we rationalize, improve our efficiencies by having a consolidated tool set? So by deploying Qualys, the first thing they did is obviously that full view of asset management because of our asset management discovery capability. And that gives them the peace of mind that they know that they're able to see all of their assets, which is a big lift in posture already. Second part is our vulnerability scanning capability is risk-based. So it allows them to prioritize vulnerabilities based on risk to their business, which is highly contextual. And so it allows them to focus on specific risks that they need to fix. And from there, they can use our automated patch management to actually go out and fix those vulnerabilities. Now, they tell us that reduced their patching effort from days to hours. And if you think about what I said earlier around how fast vulnerabilities get weaponized, you don't really have days to mess around with patching, right? You need to patch those critical vulnerabilities as soon as possible. Again, so a big security uplift. The other thing was interesting is from a consolidation perspective, Qualys has a lot of capabilities, too many to probably go through sitting here chatting with you, David, but one of them is a external scanning capability, which they're leveraging. So think of it as, attackers look at your environment externally and they scan for misconfigurations in web applications and web-facing servers and systems. And so they use that capability to offset a large part of their pen testing budget, saved about 50% on their pen testing budget. And they're able to reinvest that back into their own business and spend it on other projects and services. So they're a great example of how Qualys can consolidate a capability, provide an uplift in security and a return on investment in the money you spend.
Yeah, that's fantastic. No, I appreciate you telling me that through. That's wonderful. And so I guess, is there what else is on your mind? What else have you been thinking about?
I think I'm like everybody else at the moment, David. I think AI is probably the front and center in my mind at the moment. And I know we talked about it earlier, but it's not just how it's being used to weaponize against people. I think about what effect it will have on our industry. I'm very interested in things like what will it do to jobs? What does a young person who's not had 20 years in the business, what does it look like for them when they come in and get to my age? What does AI look like then? What does it look like now? What effect will it have on jobs and businesses? And I'm keen to research that more. It's funny because the research at the moment says that it won't replace people and cybersecurity people, but I'm not so sure. And so I'm a little pessimistic about the outlook of it on our business from that perspective. And also just outside of that, just on society as a whole, it's fascinating, isn't it? That I think we're at a point in society that we're about to take a step forward with AI, similar to how the internet and mobile phones did 30 years ago. And it'd be really interesting to see what's going to happen in the next 10 years, even, with AI. That's the kind of thing that's front and center in my mind at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. No, fantastic. Well, I've really enjoyed our talk, Richard. If somebody was interested in getting more information about Qualys or taking up a trial or whatever, how would they get in contact?
Yeah, just reach out to us either through our website or to one of us directly, and we will happily get in touch with you and talk to you more about Qualys.
Excellent. No, well, thank you for your time. That's been Qualys Chief Technology Security Officer for ANZ, Richard Sorosina. Thank you so much, Richard. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you.